Hello and welcome Africa to a very special live broadcast of CGTN Africa. We are coming to you this evening live from the streets of Nairobi, Kenya. As you can see, we're in the central business district tonight of Nairobi's capital, of Kenya's capital rather, and as you can see, the streets are very much alive indeed. A lot of energy on the thoroughfares this evening, and that's because Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta greeted the nation with some very unexpected news this afternoon. During a televised address to Kenyans to mark a national holiday, Mashujaa Day, which the country is celebrating today, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta lifted the country's nationwide curfew. After more than 19 months of restrictions, Kenyans this evening, for the first time in well over a year, are enjoying being outdoors in the night air. It's been a long time coming, and as you can see, the news is being received with excitement on the streets this evening. Up until very recently in this country, police were on patrol, checkpoints were erected on all major roadways, and residents were urged to remain at home anytime from 10 p.m. onward right up until the morning. Those restrictions had already been eased from their strictest levels at the beginning of the pandemic. The curfew was first instated in March of 2020, shortly after the first coronavirus cases were detected here in the country. At that time, shops, businesses, restaurants, and the like were forced to close very early, and the streets were empty by 7 p.m. Over time, the curfew measures were eased, and those restrictions moved from 10 p.m. till 4:30 in the morning. Today, once again, without warning, the president, addressing the nation, informed Kenyans that the curfew was being lifted altogether, and the scenes that we're seeing now on the streets of the capital became possible. If you were here yesterday, this time in the evening, you would see long lines getting ready to board public transport, people in an urgent rush to make it home in time to beat the curfew. Strict restrictions in place as well, I might add, in terms of consequences for those who violated it, and more importantly, very serious impacts to the Kenyan economy as well. Kenya, as you can see, a lot of excitement here on the road this evening. Kenya's economy shrinking, of course, dramatically during the curfew's period. When the curfew was in effect, many jobs being lost across a range of sectors, so many Kenyans relying on the informal economy being forced to give up business opportunities and being forced to, in some cases, lose their job. Urban areas of Kenya, like where we are now in Nairobi, of course, experienced some level of depopulation as many Kenyans took refuge to the relative safety of the countryside, and many businesses turning away staff, particularly in the restaurant, hotel, and nightlife sector. That's one of the sectors that a lot of industry players are hoping now will bounce back. But as you can see tonight, the action is on the roadways and people are happy. We've been taking in the sights, we've been taking in the sounds, and if you're just joining us, we're here on the streets of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, where people are absorbing the news that the 19-month curfew that was imposed by the Kenyan president in March of 2020 has finally been lifted. And we are here talking with the people, trying to get a sense of how this news is being taken. I'm here with Jackie at the moment. How are you doing today, Jackie?
I'm good.
Jackie, we're here on the streets of Nairobi CBD and we're talking to people about curfew. We heard the news this afternoon during Uhuru Kenyatta's annual Mashujaa Day address, where he told us that curfew is being lifted. How did you feel when you heard the news, Jackie?
Personally, I was so happy. Yeah.
Tell me why you felt happy. I mean, what kind of impact has this curfew had on your life and the lives of your fellow Kenyans?
Yeah, I think the end of curfew will open up the businesses that have been down for quite some time, and people will be happy. Actually, the flow of people in town, businesses, and everything will be okay.
And I see that, speaking of business, business is the name of the game here at your shop, Jackie, as well. You're selling phones. How did the curfew impact this kind of a retail business for you and your co-workers?
The business was down. There were no customers for we would sell, yes, but there were no customers kama kawaida. Like, we wouldn't sell as much as we used to sell when the curfew wasn't there. But now, at least I think everything will be fine.
So a lot of optimism and a lot of excitement there. Jackie, when the curfew was in place, when 10 o'clock everyone had to be indoors and in their homes, what time would you close this shop, and how did that affect the way that retail customers would interact with you and your business?
For me, before I used to close at 8:30 or sometimes 9, but now at least I'll be closing at 10 p.m.
10 p.m., longer hours, of course, means more opportunities for sales,
Yeah.
I imagine, Jackie, and of course, greater commissions for you and your fellow salespeople. So thanks for that, Jackie. A lot of optimism, as we can see now, in the retail sector. And once again, just to drive home to our audiences how unusual these scenes are here on the streets of Kenya's capital. For so long, these streets were ghost towns at dark, and now under the night sky, in the light of the moon, Kenyans of all stripes gathering together to engage in the ordinary stuff of urban life. Evening strolls, window shopping, patronizing restaurants. And speaking of restaurants, as we mentioned, the restaurant industry was one of the worst hit sectors of the Kenyan economy during the 19 months of the COVID-19 curfew here in Kenya. Many restaurant workers lost their jobs, and industry advocacy groups throughout the pandemic period urging the Kenyan government to ease those curfew restrictions. I'm here now at one such restaurant just to see how the news is being absorbed. How are you doing today, sir?
Today the business has lifted because President ameongea akatoa curfew na tukafurahia sana kama Wakenya na kama wapendwa wa mahoteli na the hotel industry. Tumekuwa na shida sana kutoka ile wakati kuliwekwa curfew. I can speak Swahili.
Yeah, Swahili is okay, but maybe we can just translate for the English-speaking audience at home.
Okay.
I believe what my friend is telling me here is that the curfew has brought problems for the hotel and restaurant sector, and maybe you can just tell us quickly exactly what kind of problems those were in English, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. For the matter concerning hotel industry, we have been it has been so much storm because in the time that President has announced that there is curfew is from 7, some of our staffs were chasing out because there was no customers, and then when we came back to restaurants, the time that the curfew extended to 10, there were no more customers. Staffs were working for a lot of hours, but now we are happy because everything is open for now. Thank you.
Can you describe to our audience this scene that we're seeing here? I mean, we're seeing crowds of people, there's matatus lining up, and maybe if we can just shift the camera to show what that scene looks like, just to take in the sights here. As we can see, teams of people crowding the roadways, the pavements are packed from end to end. Is this something that you've been seeing in recent days, or is this something new in this area tonight?
Okay, this is new because in most cases, the last few days or before the open of curfew, there were no more people here because the matatu were in rush for the customers and for the passengers, because so many people they were not able to stay in town because of the curfew, and then they were going back home early before the time.
I see.
Yeah.
And just as a final question, how do you expect business and incomes to change for yourself and your co-workers in this hotel and restaurant industry?
Okay, concerning restaurant industry, I think things will be a bit better because so many of our customers they were fearing the COVID. They were fearing because in most cases we find that we are not following the protocols that have been put by the government. That's why some of the customers they reduced because they were fearing the coronavirus. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that. Wonderful insights from my friend over here. Yes. So we're just going to keep on making our way down the street here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, where just hours ago the president lifted the nighttime curfew in a national televised address, and for the first time Kenyans are enjoying being out in the night air, shopping, eating, visiting restaurants, and taking their time as they make their way home this evening. A sharp contrast to the way things have gone in the last 19 months, where a nighttime curfew was in effect. The biggest impacts are expected ultimately to be economic. I mean, so many jobs lost, the shrinking of GDP growth. These were just some of the side effects that Kenya, like so many other countries in the region, experienced as a result of efforts to contain the novel coronavirus pandemic. Today, the President Uhuru Kenyatta telling Kenyans that the national strategy of coronavirus response has reached a point where it's shifting from a survival strategy to, in his words, coexisting with the virus. And in some ways, there is a lot of statistical data to support this kind of decision. New COVID-19 infection rates in Kenya have been declining in recent days and weeks, now down to positivity test rates of as little as 5% per day. A sharp contrast to some of the positivity test rates in Kenya, and particularly here in Nairobi during the earlier stages of the pandemic. But the president was also quick to remind his audience and his fellow Kenyans that the worst was not over yet, and that the fight against COVID-19 here in Kenya will need to continue. For example, the national mask mandate is still in effect. Legally speaking, Kenyans, when out in public and at places of business, are expected to wear face coverings, and as you can see, the majority of those on the street this evening are doing exactly that. We mentioned the importance of the informal economy. One thing that hasn't changed in Kenya during the curfew era was the street commerce activity, as important as ever, especially when so many of those working in the formal sectors of the economy found themselves unemployed and out of work. The problem, of course, is, especially in a city like Nairobi, where so many residents commute from a great distance, when transportation is such a challenge, that reduces the amount of foot traffic on the roads in the evening, and it also reduces the amount of customers that some of these street vendors can rely on. Just a parting word on the transportation sector as we bring this special live stream broadcast of CGTN Africa to a close this evening. We see here the buses and matatus, the backbone of Kenya's transportation economy. These are the people movers, the ones that get Kenyans from A to B. I mean, these buses are really a driving factor of the economy in many, many ways, and a sector that employs a very large number of people. Early in the pandemic, certain regulations came into effect limiting the amount of passengers allowed on a given vehicle. Other pressures have also reduced earnings for those employed in the sector. Now, with the curfew being lifted, the potential for the transportation economy to rebound is being widely cited by observers and members of the industry alike. Of course, it's not just these city buses that we're talking about. The overnight transport of passengers across long distances between major cities in the country, from Nairobi to Kisumu, for example, or Nairobi to Mombasa, was a major money earner for the transportation sector. That became largely impossible during the dusk to dawn curfew and some of the associated county line lockdowns that the Kenyan government put into place over the course of the past 1.5 years. Now, with that curfew being lifted just today, hours ago, there is refound hope for the prospects of the matatu industry and the associated transport sector. So once again, to our viewers, here in Nairobi, the streets of the evening are coming to life once again after the news that broke this afternoon of Uhuru Kenyatta lifting the dusk to dawn curfew that was in effect for as many as 19 months during the course of the coronavirus pandemic here in Kenya. And the lifting of that curfew has brought the people out a lot of excitement, a lot of jubilation, a lot of celebration today. We urge our viewers to continue staying tuned to CGTN Africa as we cover this story and others. Coming up in just a few minutes at 8 p.m. Nairobi time, we do have Africa Live coming to you, so do be sure to stay tuned. From Nairobi Central Business District in the Kenyan capital, on the eve of the lifting of curfew, this is Daniel Plafker. Good night.